Rain slicked the city streets, turning the streetlights into golden smear across wet asphalt. Mariah James gripped her leather briefcase tightly, the edges cutting into her palm. She had barely stepped out of her car when Officer Derek Stanton's voice boomed behind her. "Where do you think you're going, miss?" Stanton's tone was casual, but the weight behind it carried years of unspoken judgment. His eyes, sharp and suspicious, swept over her like she was a problem to be contained. I'm just heading into City Hall," Mariah said, steadying her voice. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk, echoing through the empty night. Stanton smirked, leaning slightly on his patrol car. With all those files, planning to stir trouble again. A knot formed in her stomach. She knew that tone, the one officers use when deciding who deserved respect. It wasn't the first time her name, her face, her presence alone had drawn suspicion. "Excuse me?" she asked, voice sharp but controlled. "Relax, James. You know what I mean. Don't bring your little black paperwork circus here." Stanton's words hit like cold steel. Mariah froze. Her files, hours of documentation on police misconduct, were exposed as contempt. She felt the familiar burn of anger rise, but the weight of the city's night press against her chest. He chuckled, then stepped closer. "Careful. Some people might get the wrong idea about what you're carrying." She looked down, heart hammering, and then she realized something. In her bag, nestled between case files, was a document Stanton had fought to keep buried. His disciplinary report, the one that could ruin him. For a long, suspended heartbeat, the rain fell between them, and then Stanton's phone buzzed, and everything shifted. The rain came in sudden, sharp sheets, bouncing off the asphalt like tiny hammers. Mariah James tugged her coat tighter, the collar soaking through instantly. City Hall's marble steps glimmered under streetlights, streaked with water, reflecting a distorted world she navigated every day. She adjusted her grip on the leather briefcase, its corners pressed hard into her palm, and stepped forward. "Hold it right there." The voice cut through the drizzle like a siren. Officer Derek Stanton leaned against a patrol car, hood up, eyes scanning her like a predator assessing prey. Mariah froze, feeling the familiar tightening in her chest, the uninvited anticipation of conflict she had learned to expect in her 29 years. "Good evening, Officer Stanton," she said, steady, polite, but wary. "Evening," he drawled, eyes narrowing. "That's a lot of paperwork you're carrying. What's in the bag? You bringing trouble to City Hall?" Mariah's stomach knotted. She had faced veiled threats, snide remarks, whispers that turned into public scrutiny, but there was something sharper tonight, something personal. These are just documents for my cases," she said, forcing calm into her tone. "Standard filing." Stanton laughed, a sound like gravel. He pushed off the patrol car, looming. "Standard, huh? You always carrying those files around like armor. Some might call it paranoid." She felt the words slice through her, precise and intentional. She squared her shoulders, refusing to let fear show. "I'm careful. Unlike some, I keep records." The briefest flicker of recognition passed through Stanton's eyes, then vanished. "Records? Careful. Careful. You always think you're smarter than everyone else, don't you?" "I keep track," she said softly. Her voice didn't waver, though her mind raced. She knew what he meant. Her meticulous nature, her insistence on accountability, had made her an irritant. She had seen the files he had fought to bury. "Watch yourself," Stanton murmured, leaning closer. "Not everyone appreciates black paperwork." The insult hung in the air, heavy wet with rain and menace. Mariah gritted her teeth, keeping her composure. She knew she couldn't retaliate here. Not yet. Every move had consequences. Every word weighed against her. She adjusted the strap on her bag and glanced down. That's when she saw it, his disciplinary report, tucked neatly in the middle of her files, a document she had obtained from a confidential source weeks ago. The one Stanton had tried to erase from memory, the one that could end him. Her heart thumped in a chaotic rhythm, loud against the patter of the rain. She swallowed, realizing the irony. Here he was, mocking her for being paranoid, and she held a weapon that could destroy his carefully curated reputation. Stanton leaned back, smirking, the kind of smirk that carried entitlement and ignorance. Careful, James. Some people might get the wrong idea about what you're carrying. I'm very aware of what I'm carrying, Mariah said, her voice steady, though her pulse roared in her ears. And some people might be very surprised. His eyes flicked to her briefcase as though sensing the weight inside, though he didn't know what exactly. Stanton's phone buzzed. He fished it out, his attention momentarily torn. Mariah seized the heartbeat of silence. She could feel the city around her. The empty streets, the reflective windows, the muted hum of distant traffic. All of it seemed contract, tightening around this singular moment of power and revelation. Stanton's thumb hovered over the screen. He frowned, distracted, oblivious of the storm quietly swirling inside the woman in front of him. You always look like you're about to expose someone, he said finally, attempting to regain dominance. Careful, it might come back on you. Mariah held his gaze, unwavering. I deal in facts, she said, not assumptions. His smirk faltered slightly, and she noticed a subtle tension ripple through his shoulders. He had faced scrutiny before, but never like this. Not knowing the source, not seeing the knife hidden in plain sight. The rain intensified, slapping against her coat and her hair plastered to her face. She could feel it, almost hear it, a rhythm counting down the seconds. Stanton's attention remained split between her and his phone. The moment stretched, taut and fragile. Then a bus roared past, splashing water onto the curb, drenching Stanton's polished boots. He muttered, shaking his head, irritation mixing with embarrassment. Mariah saw her chance, her opportunity to step forward without direct confrontation. She began climbing the steps toward City Hall, each click of her heels echoing like punctuation. Where do you think you're going? Stanton called, sharper now. I'm doing my job, she replied, calm but pointed. Her voice carried authority he couldn't diminish. Funny, he said, voice rising, how some people think rules don't apply to them. Mariah didn't answer. She could feel the files against her side, heavy with proof. The rain, the lights, the cold stone of the steps. They were all witnesses to a truth he had tried to bury. As she reached the top of the steps, she glanced back. Stanton was watching, his smirk replaced by a frown that didn't quite reach his eyes. In her briefcase, nestled among the neatly stacked reports and files, the disciplinary report waited silently. The knowledge settled in her chest like iron. She had the power, the leverage, and the patience to use it. And Stanton, oblivious, arrogant, untouchable in his own mind, had no idea the storm that had already begun. Mariah paused at the threshold of City Hall. Rain ran down her coat, pooling on the steps. The hum of fluorescent lights inside beckoned her forward. And then, as she reached for the door, her phone buzzed. She glanced down. A message flashed across the screen, an anonymous tip she had been waiting for, confirmation of a meeting that could expose Stanton completely. Her breath caught. She felt the familiar thrill of danger, the pulse of justice just out of reach. One wrong move, and it could all crumble. One right move, and the truth would hit like thunder. The door swung open. She stepped inside, leaving the storm and Stanton behind. But the confrontation wasn't over, not by a long shot. And outside, the rain continued, relentless, drumming the city's secrets into the night. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glare across the marble floors of City Hall. Mariah James moved with purpose, her heels clicking in a steady rhythm that echoed down the empty corridor. Her briefcase pressed against her side, heavy with files and the singular report that could dismantle Stanton's career. Morning, Mariah. A soft voice greeted from the receptionist's desk. Carla, mid-40s and perpetually tired, gave a cautious smile. Morning, Carla. Any word on the council office? Mariah asked, her tone polite but edged with urgency. Carla shook her head. Not yet. And be careful out there. Officer Stanton was asking questions around the building this morning. Mariah's jaw tightened. He's already here? Just pacing outside, Carla said, lowering her voice. You know how he is. Mariah exhaled slowly, steadying herself. She knew how the system worked. Intimidation, microaggressions past the surveillance. Stanton wasn't the first officer to use fear as a tool, and he wouldn't be the last. But that didn't make it any less dangerous. The elevator dinged and she stepped inside. Only two other people. A man in a suit scrolling through his phone and a young intern clutching a stack of papers. Eyes avoided hers. Fear, politeness, or maybe resignation. Mariah couldn't tell. In the council office, Mariah spread her files across the polished oak table, carefully sorting them. The disciplinary report peeked from the middle, the damning evidence neatly tucked away, waiting. "Big meeting today?" asked Raj, a longtime colleague, leaning against the doorway. "Depends on who shows up," Mariah replied without looking up. Her eyes scanned her documents, absorbing every detail. Raj shook his head. "You know, Mariah, sometimes it's better to keep quiet. People don't like it when you stir up records." Her eyes flicked up sharp. "Records tell the truth, Raj, and the truth matters." He hesitated. "I know, just be careful. This building is ears. Stanton has more than a few allies." Mariah's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. She had already faced him outside, and she knew what she was up against. Still, every glance at the files reminded her of the stakes. Every line of text was a potential flashpoint, a fuse waiting to ignite. The office door creaked. A council aide peeked in. "Mariah, the mayor's assistant wants to see you. Something about public records requests." She nodded, gathering a few files. "On my way." The hallway smelled of rain-soaked concrete, disinfectant, and stale coffee. Mariah's steps were measured, each one echoing like a heartbeat in the cavernous space. She passed Stanton's patrol car idling outside the building. He hadn't moved since last night. His reflection caught in the glass doors. He stared, unreadable, masking curiosity with routine authority. Inside the mayor's office, Mariah was greeted by Diane, the mayor's assistant, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a precise tone. "Mariah, thank you for coming. We have some concerns about recent public filings." Diane gestured toward the documents Mariah carried. "Can we discuss them?" "Of course," Mariah said, setting the files down carefully. "Everything here is transparent, per city regulations." Diane's gaze lingered on the case files. Some of these reports, they could reflect poorly on certain departments. Mariah leveled her gaze, unwavering. They reflect reality, and reality isn't always convenient. A pause. Diane's fingers tapped on the desk. "You understand the risks involved, yes? Not everyone appreciates scrutiny." Mariah nodded, carefully choosing her words. "I understand the risks, but someone has to document the facts." Behind the polite professional exchange, tension simmered. Every word, every gesture, carried weight. The city was a chessboard, and Mariah knew Stanton had positioned himself as a silent enforcer, watching, waiting, ready to exploit any misstep. She excused herself and returned to her office, placing the files under lock and key, save for the one she needed immediately. Her mind raced with contingency plans. How to present the report, who could witness it, who would be credible allies, and who would betray her for convenience or fear. The phone rang. Mariah picked it up, expecting routine inquiries. Instead, a hushed, urgent voice came through. "Mariah, it's me. You need to be careful. Stanton's asking questions about you. He's asking about your files. Don't let him see them." Her grip tightened around the receiver. "How much does he know?" "Not everything. Yet, but he's suspicious. He has a way of sniffing out trouble. Watch yourself. And don't trust the elevators alone." The line went dead. Mariah sat back, eyes narrowing. She had seen Stanton operate. The subtle intimidation, the coded threats, the ability to make allies complicit through fear. Every step in City Hall now carried potential exposure or danger. She glanced at the disciplinary report again. It was more than just a file. It was leverage, protection, and a weapon, all wrapped in fragile paper. Stanton had no idea. He didn't suspect that the very woman he aimed to humiliate carried the key to his undoing. Her thoughts were interrupted by a knock. Raj stepped in again, frowning. He was outside again, pacing. "You should—" "I know," Mariah interrupted. "I've got it under control. I have to move forward, Raj. I can't let fear dictate my actions." He hesitated, then nodded. Just promise me you'll be careful." "I promise," she said, but inwardly she acknowledged the truth. Careful wasn't enough. She would have to be brilliant, deliberate, and courageous. Stanton's presence was a constant shadow, a reminder that the city tolerated certain abuses of power and that justice was rarely immediate. The afternoon passed in tense rhythm. Mariah fielded calls, signed documents, and attended briefings. Stanton's patrol car remained a looming silhouette outside, a silent reminder of authority misused. Each glance from the windows to the streets carried the weight of surveillance and potential confrontation. By late afternoon, Mariah returned to her apartment that evening, the city streets still slick with rain, reflecting neon signs and fractured patterns. She placed her briefcase on the kitchen table, peeling off her wet coat, and exhaled. The apartment smelled of coffee and old paper, a comforting contrast to the sterile tension of City Hall. She set the files open, her eyes immediately finding the disciplinary report. Its thin folder, unassuming yet powerful, carried more weight than any single arrest or city ordinance. The paper detailed years of misconduct, carefully documented, yet systematically ignored by the institution that had sworn to police its own. Her phone buzzed. It was Raj. "Mariah, you still there?" he asked, voice low and cautious. "I'm here," she replied, going through the report. "You're walking a dangerous line," he said. "I mean, Stanton, he's volatile. He's got influence and people protect him." Mariah's fingers traced the first page. "I know, but if no one holds him accountable, nothing changes. Someone has to start." There was a pause on the line. "Just remember, this isn't just about exposing him. You have to protect yourself too." "I'm careful," Mariah said, "and strategic." Her eyes moved down the page. The report detailed complaints spanning over 7 years: harassment, misuse of authority, intimidation, and falsification of reports. Each entry was a thread, woven together into a tapestry of negligence and abuse. She read a witness statement from an officer who had tried to report him. Their words were fragmented, hesitant, like a confession trapped in fear. "I didn't want to be next. He has power. Everyone turns a blind eye." Mariah exhaled sharply. She knew this pattern. Fear and silence enabling wrongdoing. Stanton thrived in that vacuum. Every promotion, every commendation, had been built on the blind loyalty of those too afraid to speak. Her phone rang again, this time an unknown number. She answered, voice steady. "Mariah James?" The voice was clipped, professional. "Yes, I'm from the investigative unit. I hear you have information on Officer Stanton. Can we meet?" Her heart skipped. "Yes. Where and when?" "Downtown cafe. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. Bring what you can." She hung up, pulse quickening. This was the opportunity, but also a risk. Stanton had already been suspicious. If he traced this meeting, it could backfire catastrophically. Her mind flicked back to the morning, the hallway at City Hall. The subtle looks, the unspoken warnings. People watched, and sometimes silence spoke louder than threats. She refocused on the report. One section detailed a complaint filed by a young woman he had falsely accused of obstruction during a protest. Her voice in the report was clear, even as her presence had been ignored. "He used his badge to intimidate me. He said I wouldn't last in the city, not in that neighborhood, not anywhere." Mariah's chest tightened. She had seen too many of these cases dismissed. People like Stanton depended on that dismissal, on the quiet complicity of those around him. Her laptop pinged. An email from an old mentor, someone she trusted in city oversight. Subject line: Stanton files, urgency. Opening it, Mariah saw attachments, background on prior complaints, internal memos, and annotations matching her own files. Her mentor's note read, "You're not alone. Use caution, but use the facts. He cannot hide forever." She leaned back, rubbing her temples. The city's bureaucracy was a labyrinth, a protective maze for the powerful. Stanton was not just an individual problem. He was a symptom of systemic failure, a product of silence and oversight gone wrong. Footsteps outside her apartment door startled her. She peeked through the peephole. No one. Still, the hair on her arms prickled. Stanton had ways of finding those who oppose him. She locked the door twice, a ritual caution she had learned over years of navigating risk. Mariah returned to report. She skimmed a summary of his disciplinary hearings. Many were dismissed with little investigation, citing lack of evidence or insufficient witness credibility. The report highlighted patterns: microaggressions, intimidation tactics, false documentation, and selective enforcement. She muttered to herself, the word sharp, pointed. This is an oversight. This is cover-up. A knock at her door startled her again. She peeked. This time it was Raj, soaked from the rain, holding an umbrella and a coffee cup. "Thought you might need this," he said, handing her the cup. "You look like you're about to read the whole city into oblivion." Mariah smiled faintly, taking it. "Thanks." He leaned against the doorframe, eyes scanning the apartment. "So, this report, you really think it can take him down?" "It has to," Mariah said. "It's not just about him. It's about the system that lets him operate unchecked." Raj nodded slowly. "People are scared, Mariah. You know that. Even talking about this can get you in trouble." "I know," she admitted, "which is why I'm not doing this blindly. I'm documenting, strategizing, and waiting for the right moment." He frowned, concern evident. "And if he finds out you have it?" Mariah's jaw tightened. "Then we make sure the city sees the truth too. He's used fear as armor for years. It's time he faces facts instead of intimidation." The room fell silent, except for the soft drip of water from the rain, still clinging to the windowsill. Mariah's gaze remained on the report. Every paragraph, every entry, every witness statement was a nail in the coffin of Stanton's unchecked authority. Her mind drifted to the interview scheduled tomorrow, the investigative unit, the journalist, the allies she had quietly cultivated. Each would play a part, and yet she could not ignore the danger. Stanton's influence stretched through precincts, council offices, and community networks. One wrong step, one careless word, and it could all collapse. She leaned over the table again, tracing a line in the report. "The truth is here," she whispered, "and it will come out." Raj placed a hand on her SH. The sun had just dipped below the skyline, casting long shadows across the plaza in front of City Hall. Mariah James adjusted her coat and stepped out, files tucked carefully under her arm. She had intended to make a routine stop at the courthouse, but the plaza was busy tonight. People streaming home, street vendors calling out their last sales, traffic humming in a distant rhythm. A sudden voice made her freeze. "James." She turned sharply. Officer Derek Stanton leaned against a lamppost, the setting sun glinting off his badge. His presence alone twisted the air with tension. "Evening, Officer Stanton," she said, keeping her tone even, though her pulse raced. He pushed off the post, taking a step closer. "Busy night, carrying files like that, planning to write the city into chaos." Mariah forced a small, controlled smile. "I'm documenting, not plotting. You should try it sometime." His smirk tightened. "Funny, most people just let things slide." "I don't," she replied, stepping slightly to the side, keeping him outside the path of the crowd. Every movement was deliberate, every gesture measured. She couldn't afford to escalate too openly, not with witnesses. Stanton leaned in, lowering his voice. "Careful. Some people don't like being reminded of the rules. And some people don't like being reminded of the truth," Mariah said, her eyes flicking to the briefcase at her side. Stanton didn't know it, but that file held a report that could destroy him. A street musician strummed a guitar nearby, the notes sharp and insistent, filling the space between them. The city seemed to pause, holding its breath. Mariah felt a surge of control, small, quiet, but enough. Truth. Stanton laughed, a low, dangerous sound. "Funny word, James. Careful or it might come back on you." Mariah tilted her chin slightly. Some truths need to come back. Some consequences are overdue. He stared at her, eyes flicking to the briefcase. She could feel the tension, the ego, the unspoken curiosity. Stanton had always relied on fear, on silence, on the city's willingness to look the other way. He hadn't anticipated someone carrying the very proof that exposed his misconduct. A group of pedestrians passed, giving Stanton a momentary distraction. Mariah took a careful step toward the fountain, letting the sound of water mask her heart's rapid beat. "You're bold," he muttered. "I like bold. Sometimes too bold for your own good. I've survived this city long enough to know when boldness is necessary," Mariah said. Her words weren't loud, but they landed with precision, piercing the veiled authority he tried to project. He straightened, masking his irritation with controlled exhale. "You think you're untouchable?" "Not untouchable," she replied calmly, "but prepared." The tension drew the attention of a few bystanders. Eyes flicked between them, some curious, some cautious. Mariah's presence, calm and composed, contrasted with Stanton's rigid posture and subtle agitation. It was a silent display of power dynamics, unspoken but clear. Stanton's phone buzzed. He glanced down, his smirk replaced by a flicker of frustration. Mariah seized a moment, stepping closer to the plaza exit. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, her control over the situation absolute without confrontation. "You really think carrying those files makes a difference?" Stanton asked, voice low, laced with challenge. "It already does," Mariah said, ignoring the slight tremor of tension in her stomach. "For those who can see it." He frowned, masking it quickly. "Watch yourself, James. People notice, and people retaliate." Mariah nodded subtly, as if acknowledging a warning but refusing to show fear. "And some people pay attention. That's why change is possible." For a heartbeat, Stanton's ego faltered. He had faced defiance before, but never this calm, this poised, this aware. The truth in her files was like a quiet storm, patient and inevitable. A taxi honked in the distance. Mariah used it as cover, adjusting her step toward the street. Stanton's gaze lingered, frustrated but restrained. He had no proof, only suspicion, and the knowledge that someone he had underestimated held the evidence to dismantle his carefully maintained authority. "You're persistent," he said, almost grudgingly. "I'm thorough," she replied, her voice steady, controlled. She didn't need to explain further. Her files, the report and the strategy behind them spoke louder than any word she could offer. Stanton straightened, shoving his hands into his pockets. "Don't think this ends here." "It doesn't," Mariah said softly, letting the weight of her conviction land between them. She continued past him, weaving through the crowd with measured steps. Each pedestrian, each ambient sound, each shadow of the city became her ally in concealment and strategy. Stanton's presence was still there, looming, but she controlled the flow of the encounter without engaging in a public escalation. A newsstand rattled as a gust of wind pushed the papers into disorder. Mariah bent slightly, rearranging them briefly. It was a minor act of order in the chaos, symbolic perhaps, yet grounding. Stanton's eyes followed her, sharp, calculating, aware. For the first time, Mariah noticed a subtle tension in his posture. He had underestimated her, and the realization lingered visibly. "James," he called again, voice sharper. She didn't stop. She moved toward her car, each step deliberate. The city's lights reflected in puddles, fractured and glimmering like shards of truth. Mariah kept her eyes forward, feeling the weight of the disciplinary report pressing against her side. It was more than paper. It was justice waiting for its moment, quiet but powerful, hidden in plain sight. Stanton watched her leave, the smirk replaced by something unreadable. Frustration, uncertainty, maybe the first flicker of fear. He had authority, yes, but she had leverage. The balance had shifted, imperceptibly to the untrained eye, yet decisively in her favor. The plaza returned to its rhythm. Distant laughter, the clatter of dishes from a nearby cafe, the hum of traffic. And yet, for both Mariah and Stanton, the encounter lingered like a silent drumbeat, a reminder that power, when abused, could meet resistance in the most unexpected forms. Mariah slipped into her car, settling into the driver's seat. Her hands gripped the wheel, briefcase on her lap. She took a deep breath, feeling the adrenaline ebb slightly. Stanton was still out there, but for now, the truth remained with her, and in the quiet of the city night, a storm of reckoning had begun. The cafe smelled of roasted coffee beans and warm bread, a stark contrast to the sterile corridors of City Hall. Mariah James sat in the far corner, her briefcase resting on the chair beside her, files tucked neatly inside. The investigative journalist, Thomas Reed, arrived punctually, his notebook and recorder in hand. "Ms. James?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from her. "Thanks for meeting me." "Of course," she replied, voice calm but edged with purpose. "We don't have much time." Thomas nodded, flipping open his notebook. "Stanton, he's been getting away with a lot, hasn't he?" Mariah exhaled slowly. "Systemic failure. Not just him. But yes, he has exploited it for years. And people are too scared to report him, too willing to look the other way." He scribbled quickly. "And these files, these are documentation, complaints, witness statements, internal memos, proof of misconduct, intimidation, and cover-ups. Everything he's done that the public hasn't seen." She opened her briefcase just enough to show the edges of folders, without revealing the disciplinary report yet. Thomas leaned back, eyes wide. "This is huge, if we publish." "I know," Mariah said, a shadow of concern in her gaze. "But we must be careful. He has allies, and the wrong exposure could backfire on everyone involved." Thomas nodded solemnly. "Do you have anyone inside the system supporting you?" Mariah hesitated, thinking of Raj and a few trusted colleagues. "A few, but they are cautious. Fear is a powerful silencer. The key is strategy." She detailed a plan to release elected documents while keeping the disciplinary report secure, ensuring that Stanton's misconduct could not be easily deflected. Every word she spoke was measured, deliberate, reflecting years of navigating bureaucracy and systemic power. Outside, the city hummed with the indifferent rhythm of evening commuters. The hum of cars, the distant wail of a siren, the occasional shout from a street corner. They all contrasted with the tense quiet of the cafe, a fragile bubble of purpose and strategy. "You're taking a big risk," Thomas said, finally looking up. "Even showing me a portion of these files, if Stanton catches wind." "I know," Mariah said firmly, "but someone has to act. If not us, then who?" Thomas hesitated, then nodded. "All right, we work carefully, step by step. No leaks until we're ready." Mariah's mind drifted briefly to the city streets, to Stanton pacing outside City Hall earlier, arrogant and unaware. She remembered the subtle ways he wielded power, intimidation, silence, microaggressions, but also the cracks she had observed, the ego vulnerable to exposure. "Do you trust anyone else?" Thomas asked, breaking her reverie. "Not fully," Mariah admitted. "Some are allies in theory, but fear is contagious. People comply, because it's easier than confrontation." He scribbled another note. "We'll protect sources. Your files are airtight. We make sure it's undeniable." Mariah nodded, appreciation flickering. "Good. Timing is everything. We wait for the right window, the right moment, and then the truth speaks for itself." Outside the cafe, the wind picked up, rustling the umbrellas of pedestrians, scattering loose flyers across the pavement. Mariah's attention flicked to the street, alert to movement. She knew Stanton's network, informants, precinct connections, even friends in city administration, could track small anomalies. Every step, every meeting carried weight. "Why do you do this?" Thomas asked suddenly. "Risk your safety, your career?" Mariah leaned back, gaze steady on the table. "Because someone has to be the witness. Someone has to hold the system accountable. Justice doesn't come easy, and it doesn't come to those who wait quietly." A waitress brought a glass of water. Mariah thanked her without looking away from Thomas. Every detail mattered, every action deliberate. Thomas scribbled rapidly, then paused. "And Stanton, what drives him? Fear? Ego? Both," Mariah said, thinking of the morning confrontation and the public encounter. "He thrives on silence and compliance. He fears exposure, but he masks it with authority. That's why the disciplinary report is so important. Once it's public, his armor crumbles." Thomas frowned. "You're serious about this?" "I have to be," Mariah replied. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability. If the system fails to act, then someone outside it must. The conversation drifted into specifics. Who could be trusted? Which files could be released safely? Which statements needed corroboration? Mariah meticulously outlined protocols, emphasizing anonymity, documentation, and precise timing. Hours passed unnoticed. The cafe emptied, leaving only the two of them, voices hushed, planning meticulously. Mariah's mind was constantly ticking, calculating risks, anticipating Stanton's moves, predicting how each action would ripple through the city's bureaucracy. Finally, Thomas closed his notebook. All right, step 1. We verify everything, confirm our sources, and then we create the controlled release. Mariah nodded, feeling a rare sense of camaraderie. Even amidst fear, there was hope. Allies, no matter how cautious, could tip the balance. Raj's earlier warning echoed in her mind. Fear is contagious. But now she knew determination could be too. Careful, deliberate action, combined with truth, could overpower intimidation. Thank you, Thomas said quietly. I've covered stories like this, but you make it different, personal, grounded. And you're not just angry, you're prepared. Mariah allowed herself a small smile. Anger isn't enough. Preparation is everything. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one, painting the wet streets with color. Cars hummed, bicycles clattered over curbs, and pedestrians moved with purpose. The world continued, unaware that within this small cafe, a plan was taking shape to challenge entrenched power. Mariah packed her files carefully, ensuring that the disciplinary report remained hidden. Every movement was deliberate, a silent testament to strategy and restraint. Stanton might have influence and reach, but she had patience, precision, and the law on her side. As she stepped into the night, she felt the weight of the coming days settle over her. The confrontation outside City Hall, the files, the investigative journalists, and the cautious allies, everything was connected, and she was ready to see it through. The city's shadows stretched across the sidewalks, elongated by streetlights, merging with the night. Mariah walked steadily, aware that every corner, every glance, could conceal observers. Stanton's network was wide, but so was her preparation. She paused briefly at the curb. Taking a deep breath, her pulse had steadied, but the tension remained a constant companion. Justice, she knew, was patient, but relentless. And so was she. The first moves had been made. Allies were in place. The city, unaware of the quiet storm forming within it, continued its rhythm. But Mariah knew storms once set in motion could not be ignored. And in the shadows, Stanton waited, oblivious to the careful web being spun around him. The office lights flickered faintly, casting a dim glow across the room. Mariah James sat at her desk, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The city outside buzzed with traffic and distant sirens, oblivious to the quiet storm she was orchestrating from within her apartment. Thomas Reed's notes lay open beside her, annotated with careful precision. He had verified every statement, cross-checked every witness account, and yet the question remained: when, how, to release the information without jeopardizing lives? Her phone vibrated, a secure message from a trusted source. Everything ready on your end? Mariah typed back concise. Yes. Timing is critical. No mistakes. She reviewed Stanton's disciplinary report again. The entries, harassment, intimidation, falsified reports, were laid bare. Each page, each statement, each documented complaint formed a web of undeniable misconduct. She knew that once it reached the public, Stanton's carefully constructed armor of authority would fracture. A knock at the door startled her. Raj stepped in, holding 2 coffees, eyes darting to the files. "You sure about this?" he asked quietly, handing her the cup. "Once it's out, there's no going back." Mariah accepted the coffee without looking up. "I've thought about that every day since I got these files. It's not about revenge. It's about accountability." Raj nodded, though unease lingered on his face. "You know he'll try to trace this back to you. Stanton doesn't play fair." "I know," she said firmly, "which is why it has to be clean. Anonymous. Controlled. Step by step. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, attaching select portions of the report to a secure server accessible only by Thomas and the journalist team. She carefully redacted sensitive identifiers, ensuring that allies would remain safe while exposing the patterns of misconduct. "You're confident about the sources?" Raj asked, watching her work. "Cross-checked, verified, credible," Mariah said, "and they corroborate each other. The city cannot ignore it this time." Outside, the city hummed with the ordinary rhythms of life, unaware, indifferent, like the calm before a storm. Mariah imagined Stanton patrolling streets, confident, untouchable, unaware of the quiet unraveling about to engulf him. Thomas's voice buzzed in through the secure line. "Everything ready on your side?" "Yes," Mariah replied, heart steady. "Release on my signal. And remember, nothing traces back to me. Absolute anonymity." "Understood," Thomas confirmed. The decision felt heavier than she anticipated. Years of careful planning, observation, and documentation condensed into this singular moment. Stanton had relied on fear, silence, and complicity. Now, those shields would crumble without a single overt confrontation. A text alert interrupted her focus. From an unknown number. "He's asking questions. Something is wrong." Mariah's pulse quickened. Stanton was already suspicious. He had begun piecing together anomalies, her morning presence, her files, the questions she had asked at City Hall. But he had no proof, no access to the documents safely stored in secure channels. "Timing," she murmured to herself. "Timing is everything." She leaned back, tracing a line of thought through the chronology of events. Stanton's public appearances, his predictable patterns, the meetings he favored for intimidation. Each step of his routine offered an opportunity to release the information in a way that maximized impact while minimizing risk. Raj observed her, silently acknowledging her strategic genius. "I just hope this works." "It will," Mariah said, determination stealing her voice. "It has to." The hours passed with meticulous preparation. Screens glowed, files were cross-checked, emails queued for time delivery. Mariah's apartment felt like a nerve center, pulsing with tension, as each plan converged toward the final step. She paused, eyes narrowing at the clock. The moment had arrived. She gave Thomas the signal through the encrypted line. "Now," she said softly. Immediately, the journalist team activated their network. The files, carefully curated and verified, were uploaded to secure channels, sent to key media contacts, and scheduled for public release. The city would see Stanton for what he truly was, his misconduct, documented and undeniable. Her heart pounded, but Mariah maintained her composure. She had anticipated panic, retaliation, and chaos, but the first ripple was subtle, almost imperceptible. Minutes later, a news alert popped on her screen. City watchdog exposes Office of Misconduct. Stanton under scrutiny. She read the headline, absorbing the weight of it. The floodgates had opened. Stanton's allies, witnesses, and colleagues would be forced to confront facts they had ignored for years. A sudden knock startled her again. Raj glanced at the door nervously. "Did you hear that?" "Probably nothing," Mariah said, though her hand rested near the files. Her mind was already calculating contingencies, anticipating Stanton's moves, preparing for the fallout. Outside, the city carried on, but inside her apartment, the quiet storm had become a thunderclap. Every phone call, every conversation, every subtle glance in the hallways of power would now be shadowed by the report's release. She sipped her coffee, steadying herself, eyes scanning the notifications and social media feeds that had already begun to light up. The public reaction was building. Comments, shares, messages of outrage, questions to council members. Stanton's constructed image of control was unraveling in real time. Raj exhaled, impressed despite his apprehension. "You did it. You actually did it." Mariah didn't answer immediately. She knew this was only the beginning. Exposure could provoke retaliation, smear campaigns, or legal threats. But the city could no longer ignore the truth. Stanton's pattern of abuse, meticulously documented over years, was now visible to everyone. Her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous tip. "He's tracing anomalies. Stay cautious." Mariah typed a brief reply. Acknowledged. Continue monitoring. The morning air was sharp, cold with the promise of rain. Mariah James arrived at City Hall early, her briefcase tucked under her arm, the weight of the disciplinary report feeling heavier than ever. The city outside moved with blind normalcy, unaware that a storm had already begun within the corridors of power. The news alerts began almost immediately. Headlines splashed across screens. Officer Stanton faces scrutiny following whistleblower report. City watchdog exposes years of misconduct in police department. Public demands accountability for Stanton. Social media buzz with outrage, questions, and speculation. Mariah entered the building, sensing every glance from co-workers and bystanders. The subtle shift in behavior were instantaneous. Whispers stopped mid-sentence. Office chairs clicked back as people rose to move away, and the hum of quiet gossip became audible beneath the buzz of fluorescent lights. "Morning, Ms. James," said Carla, the receptionist, her voice unusually warm. "Looks like your files made waves." Mariah offered a measured smile. "It seems they did. Thank you for your discretion yesterday." Carla nodded, eyes flicking to the hallway. "People are uneasy. Even some officers are talking. Quietly." Mariah's jaw tightened. The ripple effect was real. Stanton's carefully cultivated authority had begun to crack, and every ripple threatened to become a wave. She moved toward her office, keeping a steady pace, listening to the low murmur of voices that carried fragments of her success. And then she saw him, Stanton, entering the building, visibly tense, eyes darting, mouth tight. "James," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. "What have you done?" "I've exposed the truth," Mariah replied evenly, refusing to let her pulse betray the tension. "The city deserves accountability." You don't know what you're doing," Stanton snapped, taking a step closer. "People will protect me. You're overstepping." Mariah's eyes flicked to the briefcase at her side. Stanton had no idea the most damning evidence, his disciplinary report, remained untouched, hidden in secure channels. Yet his fear was evident, visible in the slight tremor in his hands, the tightness in his shoulders, the cracks in his facade. "I know exactly what I'm doing," she said calmly. "And people are finally listening. Your misconduct is visible now. The silence is over." Stanton's face reddened. "You think headlines and rumors will ruin me? They'll fade. People forget." Mariah shook her head slowly. "Not this time. The facts are verifiable. They're documented. And people are watching." He glanced around, aware that others had paused to watch the confrontation. Even his allies looked hesitant, unsure of whether to intervene or stay silent. The power dynamic had shifted, imperceptibly yet irrevocably. "You can't do this to me," he said, voice rising, desperation mingling with anger. "You're just one person. And one person with truth is more powerful than 1,000 who ignore it," Mariah replied, letting the words sink in. Every syllable landed like a hammer against his ego. A young officer, who had often turned a blind eye to Stanton's intimidation, cleared his throat nervously. "Sir, maybe we should review the files. Public scrutiny is intense." Stanton's glare snapped toward the officer, but Mariah noted the hesitation, the first sign of doubt among his supporters. The cracks were appearing. Mariah's phone buzzed. Thomas Reed's message. Public reactions escalating. Stanton's statements being questioned. "Coverage is growing. Stay vigilant." She allowed herself a brief nod. The city was responding, fast and unforgiving. Her careful leak had ignited a chain reaction. "James," Stanton said again, quieter this time, almost pleading. "This isn't the end. I can fight this. I will fight this." "You don't get to fight the truth," Mariah said firmly. "You fought fear for years. Now you face accountability." A council aide approached cautiously, holding a tablet. "Ms. James, the mayor's office wants to meet immediately. Public pressure is intense. They want a briefing on your files." Mariah nodded. "Understood." She glanced at Stanton. "The city isn't yours to manipulate anymore." He said nothing, his silence more damning than any words. For the first time, Mariah saw the full weight of exposure on him. The fear, the uncertainty, the unraveling of control he had taken for granted. In the council chambers, reporters were already setting up cameras. The atmosphere was tense, charged with anticipation. Council members whispered in clusters. Papers shuffled, and the hum of expectation grew. Mariah laid out her findings, carefully, calmly, documenting patterns of misconduct, harassment, and abuse of power. Each statement was verified, each complaint corroborated. Questions came rapidly, pointedly, and every answer she provided reinforced a narrative. Stanton's behavior was systemic, documented, and undeniable. Outside, social media feeds exploded. Citizens shared, commented, and demanded action. Emails flooded the mayor's office. News crews broadcast excerpts of Mariah's statements. Stanton's image, once polished and unassailable, was now dissected under the harsh light of public scrutiny. "Ms. James," one council member said, leaning forward, "this evidence is compelling. The department has failed to act in multiple instances." Mariah nodded. "The failure isn't just on him. It's on the system that enabled him. But we have a chance to correct it now." A reporter asked a pointed question. "Do you anticipate retaliation from Officer Stanton?" Mariah met the camera with steady eyes. "The facts speak for themselves. Truth has its own power. Retaliation cannot erase what is documented." In the hallway outside, Stanton's phone rang constantly, texts flashing, colleagues murmuring. His authority eroded not with a gavel, not with a single voice, but through the steady, relentless exposure reality. Mariah stepped back, watching. The moment was tense but victorious in its subtlety. She had orchestrated the exposure carefully, ensured anonymity where needed, and allowed the system and the public to respond. The morning sun glared harshly through the blinds, cutting lines of light across Mariah James's apartment. She rubbed her eyes, feeling the exhaustion of sleepless nights and constant vigilance. The exposure of Stanton had shaken the city, but it had also provoked him. Retaliation was inevitable. Her phone buzzed. An anonymous text. "He knows it was you. Be careful. He's making calls." Mariah's pulse quickened. Stanton was cornered, yes, but cornered predators were dangerous. Every officer who had once been compliant now seemed like a potential informant for him. Every ally might be coerced, every silence weaponized. Raj arrived, a hood pulled low over his face, coffee in hand. "He's mobilizing," he said quietly. "Internal complaints, phone calls, rumors. Even higher-ups are uneasy. He's trying to contain it." Mariah nodded, already thinking 5 steps ahead. "Let him try. We've documented everything. The system is on notice. Truth is on our side." But she couldn't ignore the tension threading through her chest. Stanton's pride and ego had been wounded, and wounded predators acted unpredictably. Every move had to be strategic, precise, deliberate. Later that day, Mariah was summoned to a closed meeting with the city's Internal Affairs Division. The corridor outside her office hummed with whispered rumors, glances exchanged behind closed doors. Officers who had once ignored Stanton now watched her approach, uncertainty and fear written on their faces. Inside the meeting room, Stanton sat rigidly at one end of the long table. His expression was carefully neutral, but his fists rested on the table, knuckles white. "Mariah," he said, voice controlled but sharp, "do you have any idea what you've done?" "I exposed misconduct," she said evenly. "The city demanded accountability. I provided it. You've embarrassed the department, the force, me," he said, leaning forward. "Do you think the media and the public will just let this fade?" "They will let facts speak," she replied calmly. "Your misconduct is documented. This isn't about humiliation. It's about responsibility." Stanton's jaw tightened. "You think evidence and truth matter more than loyalty? You've broken the code, James." "And the code allowed fear, silence, and abuse to thrive," Mariah said, letting the words land with deliberate weight. "I did what the system couldn't. I held it accountable." The room was tense, silence punctuated only by the hum of the overhead lights. Internal Affairs officers exchanged glances, acknowledging the undeniable truth without openly saying it. Stanton's authority was fracturing before their eyes. An officer finally spoke up. "Sir, the reports are corroborated. We can't ignore the evidence. Action is required." Stanton slammed his fist on the table. Action? He rose, towering, the room shrinking beneath his rage. This is political theater. Manipulated facts. Lies. Mariah didn't flinch. It's not lies. It's truth. And truth has consequences, whether you like it or not. He stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The reverberation shook the room, but the silence that followed was resolute. Stanton had lost the moral high ground. His threats were empty without credibility, and the web of documentation left him exposed. Outside the meeting, Mariah and Raj stepped into the hallway. Raj's expression was a mix of relief and lingering tension. He's cornered, but he'll try to strike back. Be ready for anything. I am, Mariah said, taking a deep breath. The key is patience. Every move must be calculated. Retaliation only strengthens our case if handled correctly. By evening, Stanton's attempts at intimidation had begun leaking into the public sphere. Anonymous tips, internal rumors, and attempts to discredit Mariah surfaced, but careful responses from the investigative team neutralized them. Every false narrative he tried to construct was dismantled, one, by evidence and corroboration. Mariah sat at her apartment desk, reviewing each message, each potential threat. Her fingers traced the lines of the disciplinary report, her anchor in the storm. She was exhausted, yes, but resolute. She had anticipated retaliation. She had planned for it. And every move Stanton made now revealed more cracks in his armor. Late that night, a news alert pinged her phone. City Internal Affairs confirmed Stanton's misconduct. Suspension pending. Mariah allowed herself a small exhale. Public scrutiny, combined with internal accountability, had forced action. Stanton's position was crumbling. The system that had once protected him was now holding him accountable. Her phone buzzed again, this time a message from Thomas. Coverage is growing. Social media, news networks, city council. He's isolated. You've done it. Mariah's lips curved into a small smile, tinged with exhaustion. Justice was not instantaneous, and victory was bittersweet, but the tide had turned. Stanton's retaliation had failed to reverse the truth. Instead, it had revealed his desperation, his dependence on fear and compliance, and ultimately, his vulnerability. Raj glanced at her, concern never fully dissipating. It's not over. He'll find new ways, try new tactics. Stay vigilant. I will, she said, determination steady in her voice. But right now we've won the first battle. As the night deepened, Mariah reflected on the emotional cost. The sleepless nights, the fear, the constant calculation, it had taken a toll. She thought of witnesses who had finally found courage, colleagues who had risked their positions, and allies who remained discreet yet steadfast. Every small act of courage had contributed to the larger reckoning. She allowed herself one final look at the disciplinary report. Its pages, once a quiet repository of evidence, had become a weapon for justice. Stanton's downfall was not a result of revenge, but meticulous documentation, patience, and moral courage. The city outside remained alive, lights flickering on wet streets, distant sirens piercing the night, the hum of ordinary life continuing. And yet, within the corridors of power, the city felt different the morning after Stanton's exposure. Even the routine hum of traffic seemed quieter, tentative, as though the streets themselves acknowledged the shift in power. Mariah James walked into City Hall with a measured pace, aware of every glance, every whispered conversation that trailed behind her. In the press room, cameras had been set up early. Journalists were already reviewing Stanton's now public record, preparing to question council members and department heads. Headlines screamed of misconduct, of institutional failure, and of accountability. Ms. James! Carla, the receptionist, greeted her softly, eyes wary but respectful. People are watching. They're seeing what needed to be seen, Mariah replied. Truth has a way of surfacing. Her phone buzzed. Thomas Reed's message. Stanton officially suspended. Internal Affairs opening formal investigation. Public coverage skyrocketing. Mariah exhaled slowly, letting the weight of the news settle. The first ripple had become a wave, forcing action that years of silent observation could not. By late morning, Stanton had been escorted into an internal affairs hearing. His usual confidence was gone, replaced by tight shoulders and nervous glances. His allies whispered behind him, hesitant, uncertain. The carefully cultivated authority he had wielded for years was collapsing under its own weight. Mariah observed from a distance, her presence unnoticed by him, but felt subtly in the room's atmosphere. Silence had shifted the balance of power, and every look, every murmur now reinforced her moral victory. Outside, the city's social media feeds erupted. Citizens shared the documents, dissected the findings, and demanded further oversight. Online forums buzzed with discussion. Experts weighed in, and even local politicians could not ignore the public demand for accountability. Raj leaned against the wall behind her, voice low. He's cornered, but make no mistake, he'll fight back in other ways. Smear campaigns, misinformation, perhaps legal threats. Mariah nodded, acknowledging the risk. We anticipated that. That's why the documentation is airtight. Every claim, every statement is verified. He can't manipulate facts. Her eyes returned to the hearing room, where Stanton's defensiveness had escalated. He argued, denied, and shifted blame, but the weight of corroborated evidence made every word fall flat. Internal affairs officers exchanged glances, noting the disparity between his claims and documented reality. Mr. Stanton, one officer said firmly, your conduct has been reviewed extensively. Multiple complaints, patterns of intimidation and misconduct have been verified. Your position is no longer tenable without serious consequences. Stanton's hands trembled slightly as he tried to mask frustration. I've served this department faithfully. The morning sun rose over the city, its light spilling onto wet streets that reflected the glow of street lamps fading behind them. Mariah James walked briskly to the plaza outside City Hall, the weight of her briefcase lighter than it had been in weeks. The storm had passed, but the echoes of change lingered in the air. Inside City Hall, Stanton's suspension had been finalized. Internal Affairs had launched a formal investigation, and his allies were distancing themselves, aware that his power had been shattered. The disciplinary report, once hidden and potent, had become a tool of accountability, guiding the city toward overdue reform. Mariah entered her office to find Raj waiting, leaning casually against the doorframe. It's done, he said, almost reverently. For now, the system's listening. Not perfect, but better, Mariah replied, letting a small smile break her usual stoicism. The city finally has a chance to confront its failures. That's what matters. Her phone buzzed. Thomas Reed's secure message blinked. Coverage complete. Stanton's story is front page everywhere. Your role remains anonymous. Incredible work. Mariah exhaled slowly. Anonymous or not, the city would remember the wave of accountability set in motion. Every headline, every broadcast, every public discussion now carried the weight of evidence, truth, and moral courage. The day was filled with calls from city officials, journalists, and allies. Each interaction reaffirmed a simple fact. Stanton's reign of intimidation had ended, not with violence or revenge, but with truth and strategy. Later, in a quiet council briefing, Mariah witnessed the first tangible reforms: policies for whistleblower protection, mandatory reporting of misconduct, independent oversight committees, and systematic review of complaint processes. Her input, though discreet, had guided these measures. This is remarkable, one council member said, glancing at the stack of documents. The system needed someone willing to stand outside the fear, to speak despite intimidation. You've done that. Mariah nodded, carefully avoiding personal acknowledgement. It's about principle, not credit, she said. We must ensure fear no longer silences the truth. By evening, the city seemed to breathe differently. Officers who had previously turned a blind eye now moved with heightened awareness. Citizens, empowered by transparency, began to voice concerns, demand reform, and participate actively in civic life. The ripple effect of accountability had begun to spread. Meanwhile, Stanton was nowhere in sight. His suspension and public scrutiny had left him isolated, a figure of fear replaced by a figure of caution. Even the precinct he had commanded began subtle restructuring, guided by policies that would prevent future abuse of authority. Mariah reflected on the journey, years of observation, careful planning, and strategic courage. She had faced intimidation, sleepless nights, and the constant weight of vigilance. But the result was a rare victory. Systemic exposure of abuse, protection for the vulnerable, and a path toward meaningful reform.